Good afternoon and welcome to another session for the CERIAS Security Seminar from Purdue University. Today's speaker is Daniel Hoffman. Dan is a senior systems engineer with Fiberlink Communications. Fiberlink is a leader in the wireless security industry. Dan is also the author of 2 books, Blackjacking, Security Threats to BlackBerry Devices, PDAs, and Cell Phones in Enterprise, and the soon-to-be-released Implementing NAC and NAP Security Solutions, the complete guide to network access control. Dan, welcome.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for having me today. I'm actually quite excited to be at Purdue. Both of my brothers graduated from Purdue. One's a captain that flies 747s for Japan Airlines. Another one has his own very successful business. So I've spent many days and nights on the Purdue campus, so thank you very much for having me. Today we're going to cover a couple different things, but the big thing I hope you get out of this presentation is it's going to come from a little bit different perspective. You know, it's easy to get security information from marketing people and salespeople, and it's not knocking them, but it's also different getting it from a certified ethical hacker's perspective. Getting from a perspective of somebody who says, you know what, I know how to exploit these devices, I know how hackers do things, and then talk about how you mitigate the risks of security. So I'm going to give you the kind of the hacker's perspective to it. It's kind of funny. I'm a certified ethical hacker. Not sure if you heard that certification before, but it's a pretty good one, pretty interesting one that's offered by EC Council. So if you're interested in learning any of these hands-on things I'm going to show you, that's a great certification to be able to use. And I'm also going to give you the perspective as part of my job, I get to talk to some of the largest companies in the world. I get to see what they're doing from a security perspective. I get to see what initiatives they're working on. I get to see what they're concerned about. So I think that can bring a unique perspective. So I'm going to show you the security presentation from the perspective of those 2 perspectives. And I'm also going to talk about some specific hacks. I'll show you guys a couple hacks that can actually take place that are pretty realistic. And of course, I'll show you how to be able to address some of those hacks. So the big thing that I ask customers or prospects or companies when I meet with them is, at this very moment, where's your sensitive data? 20 years ago, it was a little bit easier to answer. Today, you know, it could be a little bit more complex to answer. But when I ask this question, although what a lot of companies say is, you know what, it's sitting on our land. We got all these firewalls and IPS equipment and all this physical security guarding our data, so that's where our sensitive data is. The problem is that's probably not true anymore. Things have changed considerably. Laptop sales have now surpassed desktop sales. The average laptop computer will have 60% of corporate data on it, or 60% of all corporate data resides on PCs. So think about that for a minute. When you go get a new job and you're sitting at a company, the first thing they're going to give you is a laptop computer that you can take home and work on, that you can take on appointments, that you can take on an airplane with you, and you're going to have sensitive corporate data on there. If that's true, which it is very much true, then what's protecting that data? Certainly any IPS equipment, firewalls, and all that other good stuff they have on the corporate LAN doesn't even come into play. You're not on the corporate LAN anymore. You're mobile. This is a big problem for a lot of companies. And it's interesting because the number one security application that's out there that's protecting all this sensitive data is antivirus. I don't ever go into a company and say, hey, do you have antivirus? Well, no, you know, we really don't believe in antivirus software. Everybody has it, every single company. They might not have encryption, they might not have personal firewalls, they might not be able to patch their machines. So what they have actually protecting their sensitive data is antivirus software. Problem with that is that antivirus software, frankly, doesn't do a very good job. You can look at whatever reports you want to look at that are out there, but as you can look at this from Officer here, as much as 80% of new malware defeats antivirus. So think about that for a second. And if you look at the quote here, it says, desktop antivirus applications don't work. That's not me saying this. This is Allcert saying this. And if you talk to anybody who's been in security for a long time, they'll tell you the exact same thing. Antivirus is a necessity. It's a necessity to have it up and running. It's a necessity to have it up to date. But in reality, it catches very few of the threats that are actually out there. And that's a real big thing to understand. So if you're an enterprise out there and you have all this sensitive data and you're relying on antivirus to be able to protect it, you're essentially missing the boat. And that's what a big part of this presentation is going to be about. What it basically means is that companies need to change their strategy. Again, this reliance on antivirus, this reliance on land-based systems to protect mobile systems is just wrong. They need to change their strategy and start moving these technologies to the endpoint. And one point is certainly true, and you can look at whatever example you want to look at. TJ Maxx is a prime example of where not implementing the proper technology got them into trouble. You can look at just about any different vertical that's out there, whether it's healthcare, financial, or what have you. But one simple fact remains. The cost of not doing something, the cost of inactivity, the cost of not doing the right security things is more expensive than actually doing what you're supposed to. So what that means is by putting in the different solutions, by configuring things properly, by having a handle on this situation, it's actually cheaper than not doing anything. Because ultimately it's going to come back and bite you for not doing it, and the cost can be considerable. So let's talk about data, because that's what the big thing is these days. Is it's about protecting data, because data can be in just about anywhere. Looking at it from a laptop perspective, how is data actually compromised? There's lots of ways, but I think for the most part they can be put into 4 different groups. One that you hear about a lot is laptop is lost or stolen. Happened with the VA. I'm a Coast Guard veteran. I got a letter in the mail when that one laptop was stolen from the person's house. I got the letter in the mail that said my information might have been lost or stolen. Pretty easy to realize. If you look at whatever stats that are out there, laptops are lost in taxi cabs or left in taxi cabs all the time. They're left in airports all the time. The numbers are staggering out there for lost and stolen laptops. Another key way that they're exploited, or that data is compromised, is the system is exploited. Could be a piece of malware. It could be somebody sitting there and being hacked indirectly and the information literally being pulled off the machine because the machine didn't have the proper security technologies in place. That's a vector. Also, data can be viewed as it's transmitted. More and more people are working from public Wi-Fi hotspots, at the airport, at a Starbucks, for free at Panera, all these different places. That data is literally flying through the air just waiting to be seen. And then finally, data can be sent to unauthorized devices. Data leakage, or DLP, is a term that's out there right now, very hot topic for organizations. What can people do with data? Well, think about this. You have your Active Directory permissions allow you to access these folders, so that's controlling data? Not really true. What if you take that data and you copy it to your laptop? Then you take that laptop off the corporate network. The company has no insight or control into that data. It can be copied to USB drives and lost or stolen. It can be forwarded to personal email accounts. It could be sold. It's kind of a big vector there. So if you really look at how data is compromised, it can fall into about 4 basic categories. If you've never read this report, I recommend that you do. It's called Ghosts in the Browsers from Google. Anybody here ever read the report? It's good. It's about 30 pages or so long, so it's not something that's 150 pages long, but it's pretty interesting, and it really, in my mind, very clearly and succinctly outlays the problems with mobility. So think about this for a minute. Google made the report, right? Google's got access to a lot of different URLs and things of that nature, and they basically analyzed 4.5 million URLs. In doing that, they found about 1 in 10 sites will try to do something malicious to the person's computer. Think about that for a minute. This isn't just malicious sites such as pornography and gambling that people happen to go to. Look at what happened to Monster.com, right? Visiting the webpage, your machine could be compromised. Bank of India had a very similar thing happen. What happened is you literally just open your browser, you visit a webpage without clicking on anything, without installing anything, you view the page for less than 2 seconds, and your machine can be completely compromised. Okay? That's reality. That's how it works. And I'm going to show you a live hack in a second that shows you exactly how that can be done. But basically what the report says, it says, look, 1 in 10 sites can do something bad to you. How is it able to do that? Well, how about you're missing a Microsoft patch? If you look at any Microsoft Patch Tuesday, right, when they come out with their patches and that, a lot of them are related to Internet Explorer. Why? Well, because there's a lot of attacks you can do to Internet Explorer. People use it every day. It's probably the primary application that people use, right? They surf the Internet. It's one of the first things you do when you wake up in the morning. So it's saying, look, a problem is getting the patches out there. Well, I can tell you this, and again, I get to talk to a lot of companies that are out there. Almost no company that's out there can actually patch a machine, push these patches out there to protect the machines when the machines are mobile. So if you're sitting at a Starbucks, you're on the road, you're at home, they have no ability, no physical ability to push that patch out, and that's when you need it. That's a very, very big problem for enterprises these days. And it also says, specifically, if you look at the last point there, it says if you're counting on antivirus to be able to protect you against these, you're completely missing the boat. Antivirus is reactive. It's not going to be able to catch it. What you really need is zero-day protection. And a point that I want to make clear here is I hope it doesn't seem like I'm bashing antivirus because it does serve its purpose, but it's also important to just keep it into perspective. It's a tool. It's one of many tools that every machine needs to be able to have. It's not the be-all, end-all, certainly. This is an interesting slide that I pulled just about a year ago or so, and basically looked at the top 10 viruses that were reported. Okay? If you look at the different viruses that are on there, a number of them actually do something to reduce your system security. What that means is it shuts off your personal firewall. It disables your antivirus. It does changes the configuration. It does something to lessen the security posture of your laptop by getting infected. That's a lot, right? The 55% could be a big number. Now also look at the quote at the bottom, because I'm going to refer back to this later in the presentation. Per Gartner, by year-end 2007, 75% of enterprises will be infected with undetected, financially motivated, targeted malware that evaded their traditional perimeter and host defenses. What that means is, it's not like it used to be. If you remember when I Love You came out, when all these different viruses and worms and all these things came out, they came out because people wanted to say, hey, look everybody, I made the front page. I've created this worm and it infected all these systems. It's changed completely now. Now it's saying, you know what, I'm not going to attack everybody. I'm going to attack 30 people at this company. They'll never find me. I'm going to run deep, and I'm just going to gather information until for whatever reason I can no longer gather information. The game's completely changed. With the game completely changing, antivirus solutions alone are not enough to be able to address that. So even if companies are saying, hey, you know what, I am going to invest in antivirus, I'm even going to get personal firewalls for my machines, once they leave the comfort of the corporate land, they have no idea if these systems are even up and running or if they're up to date. And that's a pretty big problem. As you'll see, malware will disable these types of applications, but then also end users will be. I love this slide. I think this is a great example. So if you're a company who says, all right, I got antivirus running up today, I got that personal firewall, I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to be doing as a company. Well, if a user gets a new internet connection, which you can see on the left, this is a screenshot from my machine, by the way. I moved, and before I could get on the internet, it said, you know what, why don't you please disable your firewall and antivirus so that you can get on the internet where everybody's trying to attack you. Right? It's a little bit counterintuitive there. And then, of course, if you look at the screenshot on the right there, if you're installing a quick cam, why not shut off your antivirus? Right? Why not lower that protection? The point is this. Just because a machine has the proper setup and configuration when they're sitting on the LAN, that doesn't mean when they leave the LAN they have that proper configuration into place, and that's where they're the most vulnerable. NAC is a big thing in this day and age, right? It is, and it serves a purpose. When I talk to companies and I talk to them about how the machines are most vulnerable when they're on the road, how malware will disable their security applications, how end users will disable their applications, they say, you know what? I'm okay with that, because you know what? When they decide to VPN back into the corporate network, when they come back onto the corporate LAN, if those things are disabled, they're not getting on. So we're protecting ourselves. We're great. Well, that's fine, but let's consider this. When do people actually handle their data? When do people actually need to be checked and restricted and quarantined and all that good stuff? How about all the time, not just when they're on the corporate LAN? Why? Well, here's a real good example. And I can tell you in dealing with corporate in America, that this example covers probably about 99% of the companies that are out there. What happens is a user has a corporate laptop and they connect to the internet. They can be at a hotel room, they can be at home, they can be at a public Wi-Fi hotspot. It doesn't matter. They decide that they want to surf the internet. So they surf the internet. People do use their laptops for personal use all the time. It's not even frowned upon, really. You know what? If you're going to work 12 hours a day and you're on the road, by all means check your personal email. Why would you want to restrict somebody? Right? You got to have that work-life balance. But what happens is the person surfing the internet and he visits a couple web pages. Let's say that he visits one of those 1 in 10 that Google found that's going to do something bad to his machine, and he gets infected. Basically what happens is literally you view a web page, again, not clicking on anything, for 2 seconds, literally 2 seconds, and your machine is completely compromised. So let's say that this happened to this user. They're surfing the internet, they visit a malicious website, and they become infected. They get a rootkit installed that's running real deep, undetected, nothing's going to be able to catch it. Then, at that point, they decide to VPN back into the corporate network, or they physically come back on the corporate network, and their NAC solution is going to assess them. Hey, is everything okay? Yeah, everything's fine. Well, clearly not everything is fine. When they were mobile, when they were in that mobile blind spot, and that mobile blind spot is going to be that area that's right over here, when that company didn't have that insight to that machine, when that company didn't have the proper protections for that machine when it's out there, it became infected. Is that NAC and NAP solution going to catch it when it comes back in? Maybe, maybe not. Again, malware and all these different things that are out there to exploit machines, they're running deep. They're not trying to infect every machine that's out there. They're trying to get to the ones that they can, run deep, and never be caught and just be silent. Okay? So this is actually a really prime example of how somebody who's mobile can be exploited. I'm actually going to show you an example of this taking place now. Let me bring this up real quick. So what I have set up here is basically two different things. One is, think of them as a victim. And this is just a corporate user, right? A typical corporate user who happens to have corporate data that's on his machines. It happens all the time, whether it's sales information, competitive information, formulas. There's some type of intellectual property on just about every corporate machine that's out there. And this person happens to be, let's just say he's sitting at a Starbucks. Nothing against Starbucks, but a lot of people go there for Wi-Fi, right? And he's sitting on there, and you can see, if you look at his machine, he's got his folder on here, his secret data folder, with his top secret information in there. He keeps it all very organized. You can see he has customer account numbers, he has some passwords, employee social security numbers, all kinds of good stuff on his laptop. Okay? And he's at a public Wi-Fi hotspot, he's checking his personal email. So we have a victim that's sitting there. On the other end, we have an attacker. Now this attacker, what he wants to do is create a malicious web page where somebody visits it for less than 2 seconds and they're able to exploit the machine. Again, this isn't pie in the sky stuff. This happened. When you heard about Monster.com, it was very similar to this scenario right here. And it's going to happen more and more often, I assure you that. So basically on this side you have an attacker. And I'm using a tool here that's called Metasploit. It was developed by H.D. Moore. Not sure if you all have heard of him. He's a real smart security guy. If you've never heard of this tool and you're interested in security, I highly, highly recommend you become familiar with it. Basically what it is, it's a security tool. And it's free. Go to Metasploit.org and download it, and you'll be able to mess around with it. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to dish up a malicious web page, and then that other guy's going to connect to it, and let's see what happens. So I have this all set up here, and basically all I have to do, let me come in here, is I'm going to toy the re-exploit command. And basically it's now serving up a web page that's malicious, just waiting for somebody to happen by to be able to connect to it. And again, this malicious code could be embedded in trusted sites that you visit as well. Now here we have our friend Larry, who's sitting at a public Wi-Fi hotspot, who receives an email from his friend. Hey, check out this website, it's funny. Just a link to check something out. Well, he looks at it and says, you know what, yahoo.com, I trust them. And it goes to funny, you know what, let me see what's going on with that web page. And he goes there and he brings up the web page. What actually happened is you can see over here, you can see that he connected to the web page being on here. I'm going to run one quick command over here. And boom. We saw him bring up that web page real quick. That C prompt that you see, this area that's right over, and of course I just went right over it. This right here, that C prompt is on that victim's machine. That's on that Larry's machine. I have access to his machine, so let me run a couple commands here. Oh, directory. Hey, I can see everything that's on his machine. You know what? He's got that secret data folder. That's interesting. Let me see what's in there. Excuse me for a minute. Oh, look, a top secret.txt file. Let's see what's in there. Oh, look, customer account information, password information, employee social security number information. Right? You with me? Guy visited a web page for less than 2 seconds. His system is 100% completely compromised. I can take whatever data I want off of here. I can lower security applications, shut them off. I could load a keylogger on here that'll send me every key that he typed. And it'll send it to me every day, every hour if I wanted to. All because he visited a malicious web page. Okay? This is not pie in the sky stuff, and it's pretty easy. You see how fast that was? I didn't click on anything to be exploited. I just clicked on a link. That's all it was. All I did was visit a web page. That's a real big deal for corporate America. I can tell you that most companies that are out there are susceptible to this, and I'll tell you why. Any questions about that before I go on? Did that make sense to everybody what happened? Okay. So how do you protect against it? Well, I think there's two main things that would protect against it. The first is, how about ensuring the mobile device, that device, Larry's laptop that he was connecting with, how about that it was patching in a compliant state before he was allowed to go on the internet, before he was allowed to check his email? That would make sense, right? You know what? If he had a patch, if he had a specific Microsoft patch, that would have never worked. This exploit wouldn't have worked. There's actual fix to this that will stop it from happening. He didn't have it. Why didn't he have it? Well, because he's at a Wi-Fi location. He can't talk. He can't even talk to his internal patch distribution infrastructure, which every company has. It's not able to patch him when he's mobile. So he wasn't able to get that patch, so he was on there. Mobile NAC, which is a concept. There's two types of NAC, as I'll show you. Mobile NAC as a concept would be able to protect him against that. Another thing that would protect him was zero-day protection, where it's not looking at what something looks like, it looks at what something's done. hey, you know what? You're visiting Melissa's webpage and it's downloading something and is modifying the registry and doing all this. I don't know what it's called, but I'm not going to allow it to happen. That would also stop it. So we'll dig a little bit deeper on that now. You know, when I talk to companies and I say, well, what are you looking to do to protect your corporate devices? And they say, well, you know, we're looking at Cisco NAC and Microsoft NAP. I say, well, that's great, but not really designed to protect your mobile devices. And here's why. And nothing against Cisco and Microsoft, by the way. But if you look at their own product descriptions on what they're supposed to do, they protect the corporate LAN from devices that are bad. You look at any LAN-based NAC solution, that's exactly what they're going to say in their own words. We're going to protect a corporate LAN against devices whose security posture are deficient from coming onto the LAN. And that's what this diagram shows right here. So basically what happens is you have the laptop over here who connects to the internet. They launch their VPN client, and as they're coming onto the network, they're assessed. Do you have all these patches? Your antivirus running up to date? You got that personal firewall running? You got your encryption application installed? Whatever the menu of items that it wants to look. If all those things are true, then I'm going to let you in. If those things aren't true, I'm going to put you on a separate network, and I'm going to hopefully fix you. Okay? So what it's designed to do is protect this area right here from this device.
Touchscreen's not working.
Touchscreen's not working?
Well, yeah, it may be going to the recording, but we're not seeing it here. Sorry.
I'll be more illustrative as I talk then. Let me take it out of here. Let me get rid of the... So basically, that area in the red, where you don't have that control, where the person's sitting in a Wi-Fi hotspot, that's called the mobile blind spot. You can see just by the nature of this solution that if your assessment, quarantining, and remediation point is when you're coming back to the LAN, what does it do to you when you don't come back to the LAN? And the answer is absolutely nothing. So you look at that whole red area there. There's no protection being afforded by that LAN-based NAC solution. It's not even talking to it. Somebody sitting at home, they plug in their laptop, there's nothing going on. It's not talking to those servers. They're not even in play. And I can tell you, as a trend, that more and more often people are actually connecting less. Why? There's less of a need to. A lot of applications are becoming webified. People are spending more and more time just connected to the internet and not actually VPNing back to the corporate network. Okay? Now compare that assessment that happens as they connect to this slide here on mobile NAC, the concept of mobile NAC. Well, what if instead of assessing them as they came into the VPN, what if as soon as they started their machine there was an assessment? Got all these things in place? Yes or no? You're compliant or you're not? If you are compliant, go ahead and connect to that hotspot at T-Mobile. Go ahead and connect to that home network. But you know what? If you're not compliant, before you even try to connect, let's do a couple of different things here. One is how about automatically fix the problem? And the second is quarantine and limit their functionality. So for example, let's say they got infected with a piece of malware that shut off their antivirus software. Why not just restart their antivirus software for them? That makes sense, right? This is something that mobile NAC is able to do. If something's deficient, automatically fix it. Hey, you don't have that Microsoft patch that came out that makes you vulnerable to visiting a web page and getting hacked? Let me get you that patch as your mobile. Right? Fixing the problem automatically. Not prompting an end user, hey, Mr. End User, go to this website and download this. That's crazy. All this should happen in the background. So in fixing the problem, it might take time to do that, and it might not be able to fix. How about quarantining and limiting their functionality? You know what? Your antivirus software isn't working. How about you can't use Word until then? That makes sense, right? Because that could infect you. How about if you're non-compliant, you can't use your VPN client, and you can't come into the network? Then how about if you're missing an Internet Explorer patch, you're not allowed to use Internet Explorer until you get that patch? That all makes sense. But then also look at it from a layer 3 perspective. If you're non-compliant, your security posture is deficient, how about you can't go everywhere in the world on the internet? How about the only places you can go to are servers that are going to fix you? And that's it. That makes a whole lot of sense. So the difference between, if you look at it, the difference between LAN-based NAC, which had that big mobile blind spot there on the left that was red, and mobile NAC is that mobile NAC protects the endpoint. You can see that assessment, quarantining, and remediation point is on the laptop. It's software sitting on the laptop enforcing all that stuff. It's not a piece of hardware that's sitting on a firewall on the other side of the LAN that's only accessible when you're on the LAN. So it's truly designed to protect the mobile laptop as it's mobile. Big difference between protecting the corporate LAN. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, that's a pretty important concept that's out there. So again, this is a conceptual thing. So, you know, it's funny, we come across all these different NAC and NAP solutions that come across the pipe. Say, wow, well, how does that one work? What does that do? What are the components of that? You know what? Ultimately, it doesn't matter. Is it going to protect your mobile from a mobility standpoint? Are you going to protect the mobile device with it or not? If it's sitting on, it's a piece of hardware behind the firewall, you're not going to. Okay? So that's the NAC part of it. But you know that vector that we were talking about also was lost and stolen laptops, right? And I'm sure you guys, you can look at all the different statistics you have about it. But it's actually kind of funny because people ask me to say, well, that's fine. If if my laptop is lost, you know, I got a really hard Windows password on there. So somebody would have to guess this 16-character Windows password on there to be able to get access to my data. It's like, really? That's actually not true. There's a couple applications on there. I have Helix mentioned here. On this USB drive right here, if there was a laptop that didn't have encryption on it and it was sitting here, I can boot to it in probably 2 minutes. I can access any file that I wanted to on there. I can copy it over to here. I can mess with it. I can create usernames on an account. I can do anything I wanted to a laptop that was sitting here because I have this operating system that can boot off this. This is Backtrack, by the way. If you go to remoteexploit.org, you can download it. It's real easy. You can run it off a USB, and then you can log into any machine. Not even log into any machine. Access the data on any machine via this operating system. It's pretty cool stuff. So the fact of the matter is this: it doesn't matter how strong a Windows password is to protect your laptop if the Windows password isn't used to access the laptop. If you're using a different operating system. I love this slide here. This is my favorite slides. I was doing an interview with John Galan of NetWorkWorld. He's their head guy there. And I said, you know what, I actually use this slide in some of my presentations. He says, oh, that's great. Thanks, Dan. Well, this is from 2006. And basically what it said in 2006 is if you as a company don't have encryption, you're a turkey. It was around Thanksgiving time. That's a turkey kind of connotation. And I loved it. And you know what? It made sense. Because how many laptops need to get lost or stolen? How many customer records? How many patient records need to get stolen before companies say, I'm going to implement encryption? Right? How many does it need to happen? And this is from 2006. It's 2008. So what are you if you don't have it now? Right? Something worse than a turkey, I suppose. And it's funny because some companies I talk to say, you know what, I'm going to do encryption, but I'm going to tie it to my operating system, right? Vista just came out with its BitLocker. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that. And you know what? That might be a fine strategy for a lot of companies. I've talked to one company of all the companies I talked to throughout the year. I've talked to one company that's actually going to have Vista deployed this year. This isn't a knock against Microsoft. It's not a knock against their technology. But if somebody's tying their encryption solution to rolling out Vista, most companies I'm talking to are waiting 2 or 3 years to do that. 2 or 3 more years without encryption on there because they're going to tie it into the operating system. That's not a risk I would take. And then another thing companies talk about is EFS. You guys heard of that encrypted file system from Microsoft? They say, well, we use EFS. Well, that's great. Problem with EFS is it's going to be bypassed in about 5 minutes. Okay? And how is that done? Well, here's the steps right there. If you look at the blue box, you boot to a laptop using a tool called Change NT Password, which, by the way, is on this USB drive, too. So I just kind of slapped this in. I run Change NT Password. I change the administrator password. I log in as the administrator. Then I change the password of the user account to whom I want to access the machine. I log in as that user, and the data is decrypted. That's not hard. That's about 5 minutes worth of work. That's why it's not an enterprise tool. If I was my grandma, which I shouldn't use grandma, both my grandmas are dead, but if I was my mom, would I use EFS? Probably instead of nothing. Why not? You know, it's like using WEP. It can be cracked, but what the heck? At least close the door a little bit. If I was an enterprise, no way would I use this. Think about an enterprise with patient data on there. Are you kidding me? It can be bypassed in 5 minutes. So that's just something to think about. Another thing is USB ports in general. I remember reading, it was in newsletters, it was on blogs and all this other stuff about companies saying, you know what, USB drives, or USB ports rather, they're real susceptible. That's a big problem for us as enterprises because people can connect different devices in there and it's just kind of a nightmare. So we super glued them so people couldn't use them. That honestly, that was actually true what happened. It was like, really? Well, how do people print? Because you take your machine home, you maybe have wireless printing, but you connect your USB cable. How are you supposed to print while you're at home? So it's kind of a funny thing. I actually had the pleasure of speaking with a security guy at one of the largest healthcare companies in the world. He said, you know what, we have an HR policy that if you connect a USB device to one of our company's laptops, you're fired. Think about it. They're a big healthcare company. I would imagine a number of you actually have your insurance through them. They said, if you connect a USB drive to here, you're fired. End of story. Well, the security guy kind of knew better. He's like, people do that all the time. They're not trying to be malicious. They're working. That's how people work in this day and age. So he actually implemented some software on the machine that was able to monitor a group of people and see how many people were actually connecting USB devices to their corporate-owned laptops. And that number was 80%. 80% of the people could have been fired, right? So what is the problem? Is the problem with the policy? No, it's probably a good policy to have, right? Control it, be able to control it. The problem is in the enforcement of it, right? And again, a lot of records getting lost in this stuff you hear about, it's not always somebody being malicious. It's somebody saying, oh, hey, you need this data here. Let me copy it to this USB drive. And you copy it over to your computer. And then they leave it laying on a table, or they drop it on a plane, or they drop it in a taxi cab. Very realistic things that happen. They're not being malicious, but they don't know that what they're doing actually puts their company at jeopardy. So the question on the slide there is, should USB ports be disabled? For most companies, I would offer no, but it certainly does need to be controlled. And there's some really neat, nifty software out there that's able to put in some controls in this manner. And I think that the threats from USB devices comes really in two different forms. The first is what they take out, right? So let's say I'm working at my company and I decide I'm going to leave the company, or I'm upset with the company. I can download gigs worth of information, gigs worth of data to this USB drive, take it on here, and they would never know. They'd have no idea it happened. I could sell it to somebody. I could do whatever I wanted to do with it. They would have no idea. Is that a threat? Absolutely it is. Another threat, and not just to these hard drives, is with PDAs and things of that nature. And I actually go through different scenarios in my book on this as well, where basically, people are syncing their PDAs to their laptops, pulling data off, right? So imagine you're a corporation and somebody has a Palm Pilot or Windows device or some sort of PDA, and all they're doing is syncing documents and calendar and all that other stuff. Well, now your data is on that person's PDA. That PDA, they have no control or insight where that's going. Their data is completely out the door. That's a pretty big risk to corporations. So it's what these devices take out, but it's also what they bring in. And I'm not sure how many of you have ever heard this story, but I actually talked to a penetration tester, a pretty well-known one. I said, have you ever run into this? He said, Dan, about 2 weeks ago I used it to break into a company. And what I'm talking about is what's on the screen here is, you take one of these USB devices or a bunch of them, you kind of scatter them on the ground, somebody's going to pick it up. But, oh, a USB device, I needed one, or boy, I wonder what's on that, right? So you pick up the USB device, you plug it into your machine, and just by plugging it into your machine, it's completely compromised. What happens is you can run an autorun.inf file, which can install maybe a keylogger on the machine, and you have no idea. So you, as an end user, you plug it into your machine, you look and you say, there's nothing really on here. Maybe I'll just erase everything in on there and I got a USB drive. Where realistically, behind the scenes, a keylogger just got installed, and every key you type is being sent to somebody. And basically what this penetration tester did is he created a bunch of these, scattered them in the parking lot of this organization, and it didn't take long before somebody took it and plugged it into their corporate laptop. So it's not just what the USB drives take out, it's what they bring in as well. And not only can they do this, but what about malware? I actually ran a couple tests where I had a malicious file on a computer at home, right, like an infected file. I synced it to a PDA. I then took that PDA and I synced it with my work laptop. That virus stays with it. It happened to be a virus that was on it. Stays with that as it's going across the devices. So a way that malware can get into an organization is through somebody's device. It was on their corporate laptop or their home machine. It got put on their PDA, which then synced with their work laptop, which then introduced the malware into the organization. So that's why USB devices, a lot of people, when they think about it from a data perspective, they think you just dump your data on there. It's a little bit more complex than that. It's interesting also because USB drives aren't the only way data leaves. A lot of people will forward something to their personal email account. Right? I've actually done this. I actually know of a lot of people who have done this. This file's too big. I can't send it through my corporate email. Let me send it via my personal email to your corporate account or your personal email account. Or I want to take this file home to work on it. Let me forward it to let me send it via my Yahoo email account. Again, not necessarily being malicious, but that's a way that software ends up going out. FTPing it, HTTPing it to other locations as well. And you can see, of course, syncing to the other devices. Print screening. This is a funny one too. You got a whole list of social security numbers that are in front of you. You hit print screen, copy it to a file, or literally print it, and that data's gone. There's all these different ways that data gets out of an organization. And I can tell you there's actually a number of different companies that are out there who specifically address this type of threat. And they do it at two different layers. One is controlling what types of devices can connect in. So can this USB drive connect in that's full of malware? No. Can a USB device that the company issued that uses encryption connect? Yes. It can get that granular. Can a PDA connect? No. Can a printer? Yes. So this kind of device layer controls are out there. There are solutions out there to be able to do that. There's also solutions that are out there to be able to address what people can do with data. Can I, Dan Hoffman, take this sensitive information for this customer and forward it to my personal email account? No, I can't do that. Can I copy it to USB drive? No, I can't do that. Can I send it via corporate email? Yes, I can do that. Okay? These controls are out there today. Do companies use them? They're starting to. They're starting to get that and get this DLP, this data leakage prevention. This is really one of the hottest topics that's out there, and including NAC as well. And again, one other quick point to this. If you think about it, let's say that you had some content filtering information that's on your LAN. So if somebody was trying to export data off the LAN and this piece of hardware on the LAN would be able to catch it, think about that people, what if the laptop's not on the LAN? What if the laptop's at home? What if the guy's sitting on a plane? The guy sitting on an airplane copying data over to his USB drive, is a hardware device sitting on a LAN even going to enter the picture? Well, the answer is no. So all these different technologies need to be moved to the endpoint. And actually, I was speaking with an old director from McAfee, actually within the last 2 weeks. And he said, you know what, we had a saying at McAfee that security is the endpoint, not the network. And it's true. So all these network-based solutions that are out there, they might be fine, but keep in mind they also need to be put on the laptop as well, because, frankly, the laptop leaves the network. So now we're going to talk about Wi-Fi for a little bit. And I got a saying that says, you're never more vulnerable in the world than when you're at a public Wi-Fi hotspot. And I honestly believe that. The reason for that is you got all the different threats that are going on from the internet, people trying to attack you, bad web pages, all that kind of good stuff. And then at the same time, your data is literally just flying through the air for anybody to be able to sniff if they really wanted to sniff it. And then you got the extra threat of some guy sitting behind you looking at your laptop, right? I was actually on a plane, by the way, and this was about 2 years ago. And a guy was using Lotus Notes, and this is the true story. And I'm sitting in the middle seat, right, which was not very comfortable at all. So I'm sitting in the middle seat, and there's a guy literally in the middle seat in front of me with his laptop open in Lotus Notes, organizing all his passwords. Okay? Oh, here's the password here. I knew what company he worked for. I could see, I didn't write them down. I could see every password to get into, the key codes to get into different buildings. He had everything all organized while I was sitting behind him. There's a little bit of common sense on that, right? So you look at a public Wi-Fi hotspot, people do look over your shoulder. Is there anything you can do about it? Yeah, awareness. And actually 3M makes them really cool. I don't know if you guys ever seen them. These cool screens you put on your laptop where you can see it if you're looking straight at it, but if you go off angle a little bit, you actually can't see the screen. It's a filter that they're running. It's pretty cool. Again, it's 3M that does that. No, they're not paying me to say 3M, but that's got to make sure I get that 3M plug. No. But literally the data is flying in the hotspot. If you look at any public Wi-Fi hotspot that's out there, they don't include encryption. They just don't, right? So this is an actual IM conversation between me and a buddy of mine I work for that was sniffed over a public Wi-Fi hotspot. And this is me saying this is being sent via Yahoo IM. Nothing against Yahoo IM. I use it all the time. I like it. Yahoo's a good company. But you know what? If you're sitting in a public Wi-Fi hotspot or using public Wi-Fi, that data is flying through the air. And believe me, sensitive information is being sent over that. Another thing, and this actually happened to me. I really like sharing this story. Who here has heard of SSL man in the middle before? Anybody? Couple people? Okay. SSL, of course, a lot of people, it's secure, right? You do your banking, you use SSL. That way the data leaving your laptop, even if you're at a public hotspot or whatever, it's being encrypted as it's going through the air. And that's a great thing. Part of the problem is, well, not a problem with it, but a way to attack it is called SSL man in the middle. So basically, you're not getting that certificate to encrypt the data from your banking website or what have you. You're getting it from a guy who's intercepting it in the middle, and then he's decrypting your data. Right? It's kind of a bad thing. And the reason I like to use this slide is that it actually happened to me. I was in Bangkok earlier this year. I was at the airport, and I had been on the road for a while. It was quite a long trip. And I needed to see, frankly, if I had any money left on my American Express card. And I was sitting in the airport in Bangkok, and I go to American Express's website, and I get a thing pops up that says, hey, the certificate's changed for this website. Do you want to accept the change? Now, I know how to do this attack. I've done this attack before. Not to somebody in the lab. But how else can I afford this suit? No. But you're laughing. It's not a good suit? No. But it basically said, hey, do you want to change the certificate? And I said, whoa, let me see the certificate. Let me see what this says. And you can look at it. You can look at the certificate. It's nothing fancy. And I looked at the details, and I said, well, that's not from American Express. That's kind of weird. So what I did then is I said no, firstly. But then I launched my VPN client for my corporate network, right, which creates a tunnel between me and my VPN device. And I went to American Express website. It didn't ask to change the certificate. Okay? So then I closed my VPN, tried it again, and yep, same thing, you wanted to do it. So somebody in the Bangkok airport had it set up where if you were trying to go to a site, and it's pretty easy to do, hey, I'm going to try to intercept you so that I can get your credentials logging into your banking website, and of course they can do whatever they want at that point. So this isn't theoretical stuff, this is bad stuff. A way that companies can address this, by the way, is they can mandate via software where it says, you know what, if you're connecting to a public Wi-Fi hotspot, that VPN client needs to be up within a minute, and if it's not, we're disconnecting you. So that way any data that's transversing, that's flying through the air is going to be encrypted. It's kind of a big deal, and a lot of companies, I know you know customers of mine, a lot of them take advantage of that. Here's a real good one. I was talking about this earlier. You can crack web, right? Is it super duper easy to do? Well, it's pretty easy to do, right? Here's a real staggering statistic, and I can tell you it's probably a higher number than this. But 46% of corporations still use WEP as a wireless LAN standard. Think about that. TJ Maxx, you all know how they got hacked? Because they were using WEP. That's the big mess they're in, is because they were using WEP. Why is that true? Why are companies still using WEP? Well, it's because they don't have the time, money, and resources to change it. Is ultimately what it comes down to. It also comes down to just apathy. We know, but it's not going to hit us. It's not important to us. Clearly, it's important to a number of companies that were out there. So why does that matter when it comes to mobility? Well, think about this for a second. And this is a pretty common scenario, configuration, by the way. Let me just kind of get rid of some of these things here. This is a pretty common scenario that I see companies say. They say, you know what, I have a bunch of home office workers. So I want them to be able to work like they're at the office. So we're going to put this hardware VPN device on their LAN. So that way they just go into their home office, sit down, pop open their computer, and it's as if they're on the corporate LAN, right? So if you look at that VPN device, which is just to the right of the wireless access point there, that's the device I'm talking about. So it creates a tunnel to the corporate VPN, so they're on a LAN. Well, what's going on to the left of that on the LAN side? Well, often it's wireless. It's not hard to put wireless in place at home, right? You can get an access point for $35, sometimes even cheaper. So you put that in point, but let's say it's WEP. Let's say you're implementing WEP, which if 46% of enterprises are using WEP, how many homes do you think are using it? Probably at least as many, right? So why is that a big deal? Well, let's say that it's broken. That data, that sensitive corporate data, is actually flying through the air that somebody could potentially see. And if you look at this specific example I have here, this is actually me sniffing, we use Lotus Notes, email, me sniffing an email message. And if you look at the content, it's actually kind of interesting. Evidently, the Cubs are going to beat the Yankees in the World Series next year. So bet on that. But the point is this, you run a sniffer. If you're able to break WEP at somebody's house, you can sniff their data. If they're a corporate user, it could be potential information like this. This is email being synced, okay? That's a pretty big deal, right? So that's kind of a way to kind of open your eyes about enterprise type stuff. So we touched upon a couple different things today. If you get nothing else from this, I hope you get this, is that mobility completely changes the game. You can have whatever systems you want on the LAN. If that machine leaves the LAN, they don't even come into play, okay? And you're never ever going to be more vulnerable than when you're not on the LAN, particularly when you're in a public Wi-Fi hotspot. A couple areas that you all can get additional information. I work for a company called Fiberlink.com. Fortunately, or Fiberlink, I should say. Fortunately, everything that I told you right now on how to address these different things, we do. So that's kind of nice. Talk to companies about that. But we can also go there. We have hacking videos. So I showed you one hack, right? Visit a web page and do that. If you want to see a bunch more exactly how they're done, you can go to Fiberlink.com and view those videos. Also, ethicalhacker.net is a really good security resource. You can go there and view different hacking articles. I have a couple that are up there. And then, of course, the two books. The book in the back, Blackjacking, is about hacking BlackBerries and PDAs and all that kind of good stuff. And then the new one that's coming out next month, which I'm really excited about, because this whole mobile NAC and LAN-based NAC comparison, this really dishes it out. Basically what it does, it says, let's look at the threats. Let's show actual hacks and how LAN-based NAC addresses them and how mobile NAC addresses them. And if you're interested in NAC at all, I think it'll open up a lot of eyes at how little LAN-based NAC can actually catch as compared to mobile NAC. Okay? So I've been talking for a while now, and I'd love to get some questions and insight from you all. Tell me something that I don't know. Anybody got any questions or comments?
Turn your microphone on and ask a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering, do you think that you could build a system secure enough that you could not break into it?
Me, probably. I'm not that smart. Other people, it's about, we had this conversation earlier, and I have this conversation a lot. There's nothing that's foolproof. There's nothing that's going to be foolproof. But it's about making it difficult. And I can tell you right now that hackers try to go for the easy target. They really do. It could be anybody. It could be my mom. She has sensitive stuff on her machine. Or it could be somebody, an executive from IBM that happens to be there. Everybody has something. So they go for the low-hanging fruit. So is it possible? No. But are there tangible steps that every enterprise needs to take? Absolutely. AV running up to date, anti-spiral running up to date, personal firewall on every machine, encryption on every machine, the ability to control what devices can connect to that machine, the ability to control what people can do with the data that's on their machine, and the insight to be able to patch them wherever they're at and restrict them wherever they're at. That type of stuff that you need to have. If you have that, you get 99% of the most of the stuff. Well, maybe not 99%. A good amount of the stuff that's out there. That answer your question? All right. Any other? Yes, sir.
My question has to deal with P2P on remote mobile machine. Can you just elaborate on what kind of threats that poses?
Yeah, that's great. And the question was around peer-to-peer applications. And I've got some really good, I'm glad you brought that up. I have some really good examples of that. And that's basically, you know, it could be anything from an instant messaging application to something like a Kazaa or a BitTorrent. And I actually, about 6 months ago, just went on there. Somebody had mentioned, oh, you'd be surprised how many tax returns you can find. You know, from that, because people install the application wanting to share their MP3s and or whatever, but they end up sharing a lot more than they really wanted to. I can tell you what, I was shocked on there. Not only did I find tax returns, mortgage applications to get into school. You talk about information you need to take over somebody's identification. Look at a mortgage application. Believe me, I've got 3 or 4 of them. No. But you find information like that. A real good example of that, I was in India also earlier this year working with our development team. We got some really good guys out there. The guy comes up to me and says, you know what, I won't mention the specific one, I was on here and look what I found. It was a vulnerability assessment, you know, where a company comes in and says, all right, company, I'm going to assess all your technology and tell you where your holes are. Vulnerability assessment. I found this vulnerability assessment for this bank. Think about that. So if you want to attack this bank, here's exactly how to do it. Here's a blueprint on how to do it. Found that on those. Real big problem. How I'm seeing a lot of companies address that is how I would address it personally. Is I would say, know what's running on everybody's machine and stop bad applications from running. And it doesn't mean whitelisting. You'll see some applications that are out there that says only these applications can run and anything else, including BitTorrent and Kazaa, can't run. Honestly, those aren't mature to work in corporate America right now. I know somebody who works for one of those companies is going to call me, but I'm being realistic about it. They're not. But you know what? You can see every application that's running on everybody's machine wherever they're at, and you can prohibit them from running. Extremely, extremely important to do. That was the FBI ran into that, or CIA, one of the two, or both, ran into that. Huge, huge, huge hole. Glad you brought that up. Any other questions? Harry's still a good place to go to, or no? All right. Well, if that's it, I'm going to stick around a little bit afterwards. If everybody wants any comments or questions afterwards, love to talk to y'all. Thanks.